Hello, Petal. How you doing? It's been a bit of an exciting morning at Cat Flap Towers. One of my dogs has the dog version of vertigo. So as you can imagine, a bit of a wobbly dog. And but she's got some medicine, so she's doing great. But yeah, I'm very glad that I actually do wear slippers. So, anyway, that's the excitement of the day today, and as such, I'm going to bring you another chapter, Chapter 7 of Life, Liberty and the Pursuit of Sausages, J.W. Wells and Co. Book 7. But how are you? As usual, if you want to leave me some comments, I really do enjoy seeing them. And if you can, hit the like button, notifications bell, share and subscribe, anything you fancy. It all helps the channel to keep going, and it lets me know that you're enjoying what I'm doing. And of course, we like to have a little bit banter as well. I'm sure. Oh, what a delightful subject, dog upchuck. Oh my god. Right, okay, so let's get cracking. No, in a minute. I'm sorry. Oh god. And breathe, and action, and breathe. Right, we'll try and do the thing. Right, so please excuse. Chapter 7. The daily commute is a joyful thing. In our secular society, it's taken the place of morning prayers, a time to meditate, reflect, get one's head together, to consider the challenges and opportunities of the day ahead, and decide how best to engage with them for the greater good of oneself and others. Or something like that. In the bus scrum, someone grazed his heel down the side of Polly's ankle, lathering her tights and delaminating her skin, but he muttered, "Sorry." So that was all right. The tube escalator had broken down, so she got some healthy exercise. One handle of her shoulder bag gave way, spilling her possessions onto the pavement like a Medici flinging gold to the masses in the piazza. All good fun. She was 2 minutes late at the office, something which, she felt sure, hadn't escaped the notice of reception, who didn't like her very much. The phone was ringing when she reached her desk. She flopped into her chair, grabbed the receiver and snapped, "Yes?"
"Who's here? Can you spare me a minute?"
The boss. Wonderful. She made a sort of gabbling noise. Mr. Huas thanked her and rang off before she had a chance to ask whether he was coming to visit her or whether she should make a pilgrimage to the presence. She closed her eyes. At least, she thought, she didn't have a hangover. 3 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. She squeaked, and there was Mr. Huas. She had no idea whether she was supposed to stand up like at school or stay sitting. She compromised by leaning forward, lifting her bum 3 inches off the seat and sitting down again.
"Sorry to bother you,"
Mr. Huas said.
"Are you doing Satisfactory Crescent?"
She nodded, like an old-fashioned car mirror ornament. Mr. Huas appeared to hesitate, almost as though he was feeling guilty about something.
"Look," he said, "if you get any screwy-sounding calls about it this morning, just take no notice, all right?"
Words were suddenly scarcer than refined palladium. She made a sort of grunting noise.
"Same with attractive clothes,"
Mr. Huas added.
"It could be that some people might ring in, and what they say may not seem to make very much sense. Just don't worry about it, okay? It's no big deal. It'll be sorted out soon. Just tell them."
Mr. Huas's face assumed a being strangled look, like an actor who's forgotten his lines.
"Just say we know all about it and it's under control, and we'll get right back to them ASAP. Got that?"
She nodded.
"Great. Any questions?"
He'd asked it automatically, she knew, and she had no idea what prompted her, but... "Mr. Huas." "Who chooses the names for the streets?" Mr. Huas looked at her.
"Sorry?"
"The street names," she'd started, so she had to finish. in Norton St. Edgar. Who makes them up? It was as if she just asked a middle-aged woman how old she was.
I do.
Ah, thanks.
That's all right.
Automated response. There's no personality in here right now to take your call, but if you'd like to leave a message...
So, remember, any odd-sounding calls, everything's fine, and we'll ring them.
Got that.
Splendid.
He paused.
How was the darts match?
Sorry?
Last night, against Southern Electricity or something like that. Who won?
They did.
Ah.
Mr. Hoss frowned, a bit like God, on hearing that someone in the garden had been scrumping apples.
Never mind. Better luck next time.
On which note he departed, leaving a hole in the air you could have fitted an elephant into. It was at that point that Polly once again gave serious thought to getting another job. Boredom she could cope with. Weirdness she could just about handle. But put the two together, indissolubly mixed like metals in an alloy, might well prove a little bit too much for her. Weighed in the balance against the fact that this was the only job she'd been able to get, it fell short by some way. But it was there. Definitely. The phone rang. Messrs. Hopkins and Allen in Malvern, re 88 Attractive Close. The file was already on her desk. She reached for it, took the phone under her ear and stretched for a pen.
Number 88 Attractive Close,
said a man's voice. That's right, yes. She'd found the place in the file. Let's see, we were looking at exchange of contracts by the end of this week.
It's gone.
Ah, she thought. Gone?
That's right,
the man's voice said.
Apparently my clients went over there yesterday afternoon after work to measure up for curtains, and it's not there anymore.
Well, she thought, how do you mean, not?
It's not bloody there. It's vanished. The whole bloody estate disappeared.
Just as well we haven't exchanged contracts yet. Disappeared how? A big hole in the ground, or...
Green fields, apparently.
The voice at the other end of the line sounded thin, as if a great weight had landed on it and squashed it flat.
Which doesn't make sense, because they were there 3 days ago and there was a housing estate built by your client. And before you say it, no, they weren't lost. No, they hadn't taken a wrong turning.
At that precise moment, she happened to glance down at her desk diary, which lay open in front of her. Today's date. Someone had written, "Help," in big red letters. Christ, she thought. It's perfectly all right, she heard herself say. There's been a little tiny glitch. Bit of a nuisance, but we're right on top of it. We'll have it all sorted in a jiffy. And we're still looking at exchange by close of business Friday. Is that still all right with you? The voice that answered her reminded her of the creak of an iceberg about to calve, the unspeakable inattention, the first crack.
Of course it's not bloody all right. Look, the house has gone. Pause. I've been out there myself and had a look. It's just grass and cows and stuff as far as the eye can.
Later she was quite proud of herself for her reply. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Hopkins. Ed Hopkins.
Mr. Hopkins, she said. Houses don't just vanish. There is a perfectly rational explanation. The fact is, we had a bit of a misunderstanding with the planning office and, to cut a long story short, they insisted we didn't have planning and we had to put it all back exactly how it was. So we did. Deep breath. But we went back to them on appeal and now we've definitely got planning. I've got a copy of it right here on the desk in front of me. So we can go ahead and rebuild the houses, and that should all be done by... What's the time now? 9:15. It should all be done by lunchtime, but give it till this time tomorrow, just to be on the safe side, all right? If the Heises aren't back by then, give me a ring and I'll see it gets top priority. Or, better still, as soon as we get the word from our contractors, I'll ring you and you can pass on the good news to your clients, all right? Help in big red letters. She tried really hard not to look at it.
I suppose so,
Mr. Hopkins mumbled.
Look, I've got your word on that, okay?
Of course.
Only my clients are really upset. They've already sold their old house, you see, and...
You have my word, Mr. Hopkins. As a fellow professional, you do trust me, don't you? Her heart bled for him as he muttered,
Yes, all right,
and rang off. She recognised the special quality of his voice, a fellow human being suddenly confronted with weirdness so extreme that it couldn't be questioned or resisted. All you could do was hang on and hope it would stop, before it reached the point where pretending it wasn't happening was no longer possible. Someone had written help in her diary, in red ink, in great big capital letters. It was not, she hastened to point out to herself, her handwriting. It wasn't any handwriting she recognised, come to that. The list of potential subjects was, of course, endless. Anybody in the building could have sneaked into her office while her back was turned and written help in her diary, in red ink, in whopping great big letters, just like she'd done in her dream. And there were all sorts of reasons why someone should do such a thing, just as there were plausible explanations for how work had got done on her files without her knowing about it, or what happened to all those cups of coffee. There were even tenable hypotheses to explain how a housing estate in rural Worcestershire could suddenly vanish. She'd been able to think of one just like that on the spur of the moment, with no advance warning whatsoever. Maybe the dream was just a suppressed memory, and it had been her own hand that had guided the red pen. There was no red pen on her desk, in the drawer, in her bag, falling down behind the radiator, anywhere in the damn room. And for some reason, presumably connected with some traumatic event which she was also suppressing, she'd chosen to forget all about it. Maybe, while she was talking to Mr. Hopkins on the phone, a subconscious memory of the dream had prompted her to write help in her diary without realising she was doing it, with a red pen that had subsequently vanished, like all the houses in Attractive Close, and the other one is positively festooned with bells. Pull it, and you could do a plausible Quasimodo impression. Maybe her enemy, whoever he or she was, the one who did her work for her and drank her coffee, had written in her diary and then hypnotised her so she'd have a dream in which... The phone rang. Mr. Hughes, from Dean Adams in Worcester. Was she aware that Satisfactory Crescent, Norton St Edgar was missing? Yes, Mr. Hughes, we do know that, thanks all the same. And is there anything else I can help you with? No? Bye then. But then, as the darkness seemed to be closing in all around her, a tiny spark of light flickered in her mind. Her dress. Her dress, which she'd taken to a dry cleaner's that had subsequently vanished off the fierce bloody Cetera, but it hadn't, had it? Because Don, her hero brother, had gone after it, found it, and restored it to her. And he couldn't have done that, could he, if the dry cleaners really had melted away into the air as though it had never been? No way. Instead, there had been some sort of misunderstanding or cock-up, probably something quite simple and straightforward once you knew all the facts. Don had unravelled the mystery, gone somewhere and got her dress, and everything was just fine, just tickety-boo. So, if that weirdness, which at the time had seemed insuperably baffling, had resolved itself and submitted to the healing forces of normality, then why not all the others? Her dream, the diary, the vanishing houses. And besides, Mr. Horse knew about the houses thing too, which meant it couldn't just be her diseased imagination. It was all right. Everything was okay. Silly old her, for getting in such a state. Clever old Dawn, whispered the voice in her head she'd never liked very much, for finding your dress so quickly and easily. Now, how did he do it, I wonder? And wouldn't it be a good idea to ring him up right now and ask? Her fingertips were no more than a centimetre from the handset when the phone rang. She rocked back in her chair and snatched her hand away, then picked it up. Your brother for you, reception said, frost-biting her ear. Ah, she thought. Dawn, I was just about to call you.
Listen.
She knew that voice, though its exact significance was rather hard to pin down. Sometimes it could mean you meet both of us in serious trouble. Other times, he'd used it to tell her that he'd been to see the new Star Wars film and actually it wasn't that great, or that Tim Henman, this to a woman who had trouble playing tennis apart from baseball, had just been knocked out of Wimbledon. And then she'd tell him, "Don, I couldn't give a stuff." And there'd be genuine bewilderment in his voice when he replied, "Why not?" Don was funny that way. He actually cared about separatist tendencies in the Anglican Communion or who'd won the general election in Portugal. "What?" she said.
"Look, are you very busy right now?"
"Yes." He also had the knack of not hearing answers to questions.
"Can you come over here? Right now. I need..."
"Don, don't be bloody stupid. I'm at work. I can't just..."
"What? Oh, right, of course you are. In that case, I'll come to you. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right over."
"Don." Click. Bzzz. She scowled at the phone as though a vaguely banana-shaped plastic moulding was somehow to blame for everything, then slapped it back in its cradle. Sometimes she wondered if he really understood about work, real work, as opposed to sitting around in a dressing gown making up little tunes. Then it occurred to her that she'd been on the point of phoning him, and why? Because every time destiny put a spider in her bath of life, it was Don who had to leave what he was doing and come sprinting over to hook it out. Whether it was a blocked sink or a broken heart, no hesitation, no recrimination, no squash your own bloody spiders, I'm busy. Query, she reflected, whether a man could be so selflessly useful if he had to live in the real world and do normal stuff like everybody else. She did a bit of work just to pass the time away, and then he was there in the waiting room, pretending to be a surveyor so as not to embarrass her. But how many surveyors call on important clients dressed in a colander, pullover, jeans and sandals? "Well," she said. He turned and looked at her, and she knew at once that it wasn't Tim Henman or the failure of the Iowa sorghum harvest.
"Polly," he said, "I think I'm in trouble."
"Payback time." "Oh?"
"Yes."
He nodded gravely, looked across the room, then said,
"I think I may have killed someone."
Dead silence, for as long as it takes to change a light bulb. "Let's go through into the interview room," she said. Not the big interview room, of course. She wasn't nearly grand enough to use that without booking it a week in advance and clearing it with Mr. Stevens and the office manager. Nor the middling interview room, because the door was shut and she could hear voices. That left the confessional, a cramped box where you could just about sit down with a client or a professional colleague without rubbing noses or brushing lips. "Sorry about this," she said, as she breathed in to slide past the table to her chair. "It's a bit cosy, but..."
"That's quite all right," Don snapped. "Good practice for when I get locked up for the rest of my fucking life. Did you just happen to hear what I said just now? I think I may have murdered somebody."
He stopped, breathed out, then deeply in.
"I was wondering if I could trouble you for a bit of free legal advice."
"Of course." She wriggled her back into the strange angle of the chair and tried to remember back to law school. "The police," she said. "Have you made a statement? Signed anything?"
"I haven't called the police," he said.
"Witnesses? I mean, did anybody see?" He shook his head.
"Nobody. Well," he added, "maybe an earlier incarnation of me, though I'm not entirely sure about that. Look, shouldn't I start at the beginning and tell you the whole thing?"
"Oh, right." She nodded. "Carry on."
He frowned. "You know," he said, "I'm not sure I can, on account of I'm not really at all sure whether I believe any of it myself. I mean, I do, because of the table and your dress and the £10 and the dry cleaners not being there but showing up on Google."
He looked up at her.
"I'm talking drivel," he said, "and you're not staring at me or asking if I'm feeling all right. That's a bit worrying, actually."
She nodded gravely. "Listen," she said, and told him about attractive clothes and help in big red letters in her diary. "All right. Fine. Your turn." He nodded slowly.
"What was it Arkwright used to say? It's been a funny old day, of course," he added. "It could be that there's insanity running in our family. We're both going mad. But on balance, I think that's probably too much to hope for. Anyway, here goes."
She listened in dead silence, without interrupting once. That should have been a momentous occasion, something to be commemorated with a special issue of stamps, and United Nations Polly didn't interrupt, dear. As it was, Don hardly noticed. A perfectly good miracle wasted. Then she said, "You're kidding." Don breathed out heavily through his nose.
Actually, no, he said. So where do I stand legally? Did I just murder an innocent stranger, or what?
Magic, she said. She was looking at him with a curious blend of awe and revulsion, like someone watching John Prescott juggling. You can do magic.
Apparently. Look,
that's amazing, she said. You just looked at him and... Yes, that was Polly all right, for her tact was the past participle of the verb to tack.
Will you please answer the bloody question? Is it murder or isn't it?
She frowned. Well, they can't prove anything, she said, and that's all that matters. If they can't prove it... Don made a sort of muffled exploding noise.
Fine, he said. Thank you so much. I should have known better than to ask. Really?
He tried to stand up, banged his knee on the underside of the table, and sat down again. You don't seem pleased, she said.
What?
You can do magic. She looked like she was watching for an expected reaction. Apparently it didn't come. Magic is real. It actually exists. And you can do it. You ought to be...
Are you out of your mind?
He didn't want to get angry, but it seemed he wasn't to be allowed the choice.
My whole worldview's just been blown to bits and I've killed someone. If there's anything in that to be cheerful about, maybe you could write it out for me on a bit of paper so I can study it carefully when I've...
Why don't you just throw it away? He stopped in mid-floor. Indeed. Why not? He'd intended to give the pencil sharpener thing back to the people in the dry cleaners, but apparently that wasn't possible. So why not just bin it, or throw it in a pond somewhere?
I can't, he replied. I've got to try and get that poor bastard back, remember? If I sent him away with magic, it stands to reason I'll need it to get him back.
She was giving him one of her head-on-one-side looks, the ones that meant, nice try, only I happen to know you're lying. But otherwise, she said, if it wasn't for that, you'd get rid of it. Well?
Yes, of course.
Well?
Maybe,
he said.
I don't know, do I?
You don't mean that.
Look.
He hadn't meant to shout. He never shouted.
That's beside the point, isn't it? The fact of the matter is I'm stuck with this appalling problem and I want to know just how much trouble I'm in. Anything else?
There was something about the way she was looking at him that he didn't like. It was almost an accusation. She was good at those, always had been. But this just wasn't the time. He needed her to be on his side. It wasn't much to ask. After all, he'd got her stupid dress back for her.
By the way, he said, how was the match?
What?
The darts match. Who won?
They did.
Ah, well, better luck next.
Dawn, you're a complete bastard. Do you know that?
Oh, God, he thought. What have I done now?
You come busting in here and you tell me magic's for real and you can do it and all the stuff that's been happening to me is, well, I still can't explain it, but maybe it could make sense if only we knew. And you stand there drivelling about bloody darts. The whole world's changed forever and you aren't even interested.
It's not a toy, he retorted. It's not natural and it's dangerous and I want it to go away, but first I've got to try and save that poor bugger I vanished into thin air. After that, he shook his head. If we manage to get out of this in one piece, I'm going to forget all about it and you're never ever going to mention it again. Understood? Not one word, all right?
But she frowned at him. Dawn, that's stupid, she said. It's like using a winning lottery ticket to start a bonfire with. She stopped and looked at him. It's bad, isn't it? He nodded.
I think so, yes. And I don't think it's just me either. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that you've had all this weird stuff happening to you at the same time as, well, that stuff. You know what?
He shook his head.
I think we're two hobbits caught up in someone's billion-dollar movie, and any minute now a huge army of horrible goblins is going to come charging over the hill straight at us, which means, he added briskly, it would probably be sensible if we started running now, rather than waiting for the cameras and the lights, only we don't know which way to run.
She looked at him. "How would it be if we asked someone?" she said. He blinked.
"Who did you have in mind?"
"How about Mr. Huss?" she said.
"Your boss? Why?"
"Something he said," she replied, "or at least the way he said it. When he came to my room and said there'd be a load of crazy phone calls, but not to worry. It's like..." She thought for a moment. "It's like he knew what was going on. He knew there'd be people ringing in, talking about vanishing houses and stuff like that. So, doesn't it stand to reason he knows about well, magic and all that? I don't know, maybe he's the cause of it all. I mean, it's his firm. He must know what's going on."
"You think he's been drinking your coffee?"
She thought about that too. No, why should he? He owns the bloody coffee, and I don't think he wrote in my diary either. I think I did that, only...
"All right," Don said quickly. "Let's not go there quite yet. About what you said." He sighed. "I don't like it. We've got no idea what all this is about. We can't go trusting someone just because he might be able to explain it to us. I mean, explaining is what the villain does in a Bond movie when he's about to blow up the world."
Polly had a sudden mental image of Mr. Huss with a fluffy white cat on his lap, but it didn't look right at all. Not a cat person in her opinion. He seems all right to me. Okay, I've only met him twice, but...
"If he's mixed up with this magic stuff, I don't imagine he's very nice,"
Don said harshly.
"Do you think he makes people disappear too? Well, come on, if he disappears houses, then why not?"
Oh, she thought. You reckon he... But why'd he do that? She countered. If he built the houses, why'd he want to get rid of them? Quite apart from everything else, he'd lose millions of pounds. It doesn't make sense.
"Yes, but we don't know."
He shrugged.
"I guess that's what's bugging me the most. Not knowing. I'm not used to it."
He stood up, carefully this time, sliding himself out from under the table like a letter from an envelope.
"All my life, well, you know me. Technology, gadgets. When I was 5 years old, I was the only one who could get the timer on the video to work. And it was because I did what nobody else was prepared to do. I read the manual."
He closed his eyes for a moment and breathed in deeply.
"I didn't try and do it by light of nature, intuition, or divine revelation. I read the book and followed the instructions, and guess what? I made it work."
He covered his face with his hands, then ran his fingers through his hair.
"You can't imagine the feeling of power something like that gives you. Control, the ability to make things work when nobody else can, and all because there was always a book or a readme or a leaflet or a photocopied sheet. That was the basis of my entire world. It made sense. I can say use of unauthorized components will void the manufacturer's warranty in 16 languages."
He turned to face the wall.
"And now there's this new gadget, quite possibly a gadget of infinite power for good or evil that could change the life of everybody on the planet forever, and there's no fucking handbook."
He paused, breathed in deeply.
"Well, actually there is. But it's written in a language nobody can understand. Actually, that's not strictly true. There's a photograph of me when I'm 6 that can understand it, but he's me when I'm 6, so he's no bloody help at all. And finally, when I persuade me to look it up and read me what it says, what do I get? I can send people away, but I can't bring them back. God, that is frustrating."
She gave him a moment and then asked, "Are you feeling better now?"
"No."
"Oh." He turned away from the wall and looked at her.
"But I've made my mind up," he said. "First, I'm going to get that bloody guitar player back."
"But the book says..."
"Screw the book,"
Don snapped viciously.
"I'm through with the fucking book. You know what? The rest of you were right all along. We don't need the book. It's useless. We'll figure it out for ourselves. And then," he added, "as soon as we've put things right, that bloody pencil sharpener's going somewhere. It can't do anybody any more harm ever again."
He was falling. He was falling upwards, which was a novelty. He was being acted upon by a perversely different kind of gravity, one that shot you up up instead of down. Not weightlessness, where you just drift, and if you throw up it follows you slowly around the room like a spaniel. Narrator's note. Ah! And action. It was your actual falling. The headlong, out of control tumbling, the rush of the slipstream, the inexorable drag, 32 feet per second, incremental velocity, just up. That was all. He had a feeling it wasn't going to end well. Falling down rarely results in a pleasing outcome, and from what he had gathered so far, there was no reason to assume that falling up would be much better. Maybe he'd burn up in the atmosphere rather than splat on the ground, but it hardly mattered. Any moment now he was going to... Once upon a time, he was 17. Just got his first motorbike. A precision-eared alloy frame, carbon fibre, super aerodynamic fairing, and a teeny little engine that sounded like a bumblebee on heat. Going flat out down a quiet suburban street, needle jammed right up to 36 miles per hour, and some poof-brains woman in a Fiesta had come out of a side turning without looking. Whap! Straight into the side of her, and he had taken off, like a human cannibal, flying through the air without benefit of aircraft. As it turned out, he landed in a newly dug flower bed and came out of it without a scratch. But while he was flying, death looming over him, scythe, eye sockets, the full English, all he'd been able to think was, oh well, that was it. No panic. No loosening of the bladder, no excruciating muscle cramps, no screams. Total absence of his life flashing before his eyes. Oh well. And then thud into the bedding plants. It was the same now, except that the first time he'd been airborne for maybe a second and a half, and now he'd been falling for ages. Ironic. He'd always fancied having a go at skydiving, free-falling with his arms and legs outstretched, watching the flat earth spinning like old-fashioned vinyl on a turntable. But all he could see was light, a big, shiny, cloudy donut of light into which he was falling upwards. As the air slapped his face and scoured his eyeballs dry, he thought, this isn't right, this is silly. Particularly so in context. The last thing he could remember before falling was putting down his guitar, stomping down the stairs and giving that little turd in the flat below a piece of his mind about the... Odd. Maybe there was a piece missing, because it was hard to join up the dots of cause and effect. Anti-gravity sucking furiously on his toes. He cast his mind further back in search of some kind of explanation. An average day at the office, answering calls, doing paperwork, meeting friends in the pub later, but enough time in hand before he had to leave for half an hour trying to straighten out the tricky chords in Stairway to Heaven. And that was all, really. Nothing there that should have led him to anti-tumble, the wrong way up nature's most inviolable one-way street, to a messy and premature death. The injustice of it surged inside him like heartburn. It was wrong. It wasn't on. He had a good mind to send someone a really nasty email about it, except he never would, because any moment now he'd be blotted out like a bug on a windscreen. Bitch. Oh well, he thought, and landed. Really soft landing. 2 months ago, he and a bunch of friends had flown out to the Greek islands, and coming into land, the aircraft had gone hoppity-skippity-jump down the runway. But now, one moment he was all movement in every plane, the next he was standing perfectly still, on one leg, on straw. Oh, he thought. Not dead. Jolly good. On straw, though. He looked down at his feet, then up, sideways, then down again. His feet. Not his feet, though. Where his feet should have been, due south of his body at the end of his legs, all he could see was a pair of claws. Scaly, avian, 3 toes ending in bloody great spikes. Also, not quite as important as the feet claws issue, but probably significant, it wasn't straw. It was long yellow tubes the length and thickness of scaffold poles. Looked like straw, hence the initial confusion, but it wasn't. Too big, even for GM. He considered that analytically, By rights, he oughtn't to be able to stand upright on a stack of bloody great big yellow poles, not with human feet encased in stylish designer trainers. It'd be a different matter entirely if you had claws, say. Also, the building he was in, great big wooden structure, size and scale of a major railway terminus, but built from planks, it was almost as if... I'm in a chicken shed, he thought, and I'm a chicken. One of those flashes of insight, the sort you're far better off without, but they do have the nasty habit of being right. But, hang on, I'm not a fucking chicken. I know precisely what I am. I'm a 30-year-old loss adjuster working for Amalgamated General Mutual, and on each foot I have 5 toes. 5, not 3, 5. 5. A shadow passed over him, and he knew he wasn't alone. He was about to turn his head, but realised he didn't need to. His field of vision had expanded enormously, almost as though he had eyes on the sides of his head, rather than in front, thwart his nose. And he could plainly see the huge, enormous, massive chicken who'd just hopped in through the square opening in the far wall. Quite possibly the biggest bipedal life form he'd ever encountered. Ear-feathered mountain, its apex a luxuriously crested head with 2 mad, staring-round eyes and a beak like a bale spike, the whole monstrous thing supported by 2 scaly grey legs, culminating in 2 triple-toed claws, with another gut-scrambling spike sticking out of the back of each angle at 90 degrees. Not a lady chicken, he guessed. A gentleman chicken. He didn't know all that much about poultry, but he did remember hearing about the holiday some of his friends had been on in Thailand or somewhere out that way, where cockfighting was still a thriving spectator sport. Essentially, you put 2 gentleman chickens together in a closed space, and immediately they went for each other with race beak and pitiless spur, not stopping until at least one of them was a bloody mess of broken bone and feather. Pure instinct, apparently. If 2 cockbirds meet, alternative dispute resolution is not an option. "You looking at me, bugger?" growled the cock. This time, it was worth noting, he didn't think, oh well. This time, he ran through the entire repertoire of conventional terror symptoms, from trembling and heart-pounding to loosened bowels and clogged windpipe. This prospect of hitting a solid surface at high speed had been depressing, but he hadn't really felt frightened. Clearly, when death was to be accompanied by extreme violence, a different set of instincts cut in. Adrenaline, he hoped, and also the fear-based products. Scared, he was petrified. A coward, chicken, a poltroon. "Me?" he heard himself cluck. "Gosh, no, bugger." "I said, bugger. You looking at me, bugger." The cock growled softly, and the collar of feathers around his neck started to rise. "No, bugger, I'm not, bugger." "Really, bugger?" "You calling me a liar, bugger, bugger." "Absolutely not, bugger, bugger," he clucked back, unable to take his eyes off the ankle spurs. "Bugger, bugger, bugger. What I should have said, bugger, was I was looking at you and realised how very wrong of me that was, and I apologise, and it absolutely won't happen. Again, I promise faithfully. Only please don't. One hubcap-sized, perfectly round eye was scanning him, reiterating the male chicken's prime directive. There was going to be a fight any second. Well, you wouldn't call it a fight, more of an execution, and pretty soon he'd be dead. So, really, there wasn't much point in idly speculating how he'd got there, or why he'd apparently sambected into a chicken, a waste of what little precious time he had left. "Excuse me," he said. The cock, who'd been edging forward, tense as a coiled spring, stopped. "You talking to me, buck?" He nodded. "Sorry to bother you," he said, "but I was wondering, you wouldn't happen to have any idea how I got here, would you?" "You what?" "Only, he continued quickly, "it's all a bit odd, and I don't know. I feel I should be such a shame if I died, not knowing the truth, so I thought it can't do any harm if I just ask on the off chance." The cock was motionless, I saw its feet were glued down. Clearly, something new and disturbing was happening inside its tiny little brain, something so far beyond the scope of its inherent programming that it had no idea how to cope.
You what?
It repeated. Only just arrived, you see, he said. A moment ago I was somewhere else. Actually, more to the point, I was something else. A human, and then I was falling, only rather up, then down. And then I was here, and you showed up, and there's got to be some sort of rational explanation. And since you're from around here, at least I assume you are, I figured that maybe you would tell me before you pick me to death if it's no over. I mean, the cock stared at him for a long time.
You what?
It said. Like that, is it? Scheherazade with feathers. Well, he was game, no pun intended. For a start, he went on, am I actually a chicken? Or am I a human being who thinks he's a chicken? Or is a possibility I haven't even considered yet? Maybe this is all a dream, although it doesn't feel like one, because for one thing, if this was a dream, I'd be arriving late for a project tactics meeting, and I wouldn't have any clothes on. Although now, come to think of it, I haven't got any clothes on, just feathers. How about you? Are you real, or just dreaming that you're real, when in fact you're a figment of my imagination? Replied the cock. Then its head went sharply down, and it picked up a grain of corn the size of a goose egg. As far as it was concerned, he apparently no longer existed. Too difficult, evidently. Excuse me? He said, and sidled past, out through the hole in the wall, mind a step, and suddenly he was under a broad blue sky, bathed in glorious sunshine, and surrounded by a bevy of lady chickens. Hens. Cool, he thought. And then, what did I just think? A hen looked up from pecking in the dust and peered at him dubiously. He looked back. Couldn't help it. A chicken, for God's sake. You've got to stop this immediately, or... Hi, he heard himself say. He always said hi under such circumstances. Hello never worked for him. It tended to come out like meeting the panel at a job interview, or a politician kissing babies, or Leslie Phillips. He had flirted briefly with hiya and hi there, but there wasn't an atom of romance in either of them. Hi, on the other hand, was a skill he'd gradually mastered, like wood-turning or playing the violin, and he flattered himself that he was not that bad at it. But you're not from round here, said the hen. As a feedline, it was unexceptional. It left him a lot of work to do, but it had possibilities. That's right, he said. I'm from out of town. He stopped. It was hard to be certain, because the words came out simultaneously, but he could have sworn that instead of town he'd said coop. But that was impossible, so he tried again. Town, he said. Coop. Bucket? Sorry, I mean bucket, yes. The hen twitched her head. A routine, pre-programmed, quick look round to make sure no foxes had crept up on her in the last 5 seconds since she last looked. Does Boris know you're here? That didn't just not make sense. It made the opposite of sense, anti-sense. Then intuition kicked in and told him Boris must be the cock. Yes, he said, and caught himself adding, I sorted him, all right. The fixed stare in the hen's little eye seemed to soften just a little. You did you? Let's say we both know where we stand. The hen's neck darted down, and she gobbled up a stray layer's pellet. You don't look like you've been fighting. He tried to grin, but you can't with a beak. It didn't come to that, he replied. I don't believe in pointless violence. Pointless? The hen did the twitch again, and he realised he'd just done the same thing without realising. You mean like... Sorry. And then he got it. Pointless. In a world of beaks, claws and spurs, it had not been the best choice of words. But I mean, unnecessary violence. Girl. It was one of those points of balance you get in chat-ups. In a moment when, following an advance, things could go either way. But I mean, he went on quickly, but sometimes you got to get in there, big and do the business. Sure. But I tend to think there's rather more to being a cock than that. Really? What? Time, his years of experience told him, to change the subject. Unfortunately, 99% of his extensive repertoire of gear shifts couldn't possibly apply here. Well, that's a really great set of feathers, he began, then stopped. The hen was sitting down, snuggling herself into the dust, arranging her wings tidily, as she was about to lay an egg. Sorry, he said, looking away quickly. I'll, leave you to it. Disappointment, which was good, but also had the subtext, don't bother coming back, woven into it, like gold filigree in a luxury fabric. I might hang around here for a moment, he mumbled, if that's okay with you. Do what you like. The hen was wriggling about. He prided himself that he wasn't excessively squeamish, but he shared the male's natural diffidence at witnessing the process of parturition. Laying eggs, he thought, ew. And then a tiny echo of a former existence, already so far away that light from it would take a year to reach him, asked him what the bloody hell he thought he was playing at, and did he realise he'd just been chatting up a chicken, and there was a word for people like him, and it wasn't very nice. He considered that, and part of him could see what the echo was getting at, the point it was trying to make. But he wasn't convinced. Nah, he thought, when in Rome, go for it. So, he said, been here long? All my life, the hen replied. Where you from? He tried to say Walton-on-Thames, but he couldn't get his beak around it. No palate, no lips to form the component sounds. He substituted. Don't know your breed. Clearly, political correctness hadn't filtered this far down the evolutionary chain. I'm a pedigree, he said, trying to sound offhand about it. Red breed, actually. Grudgingly impressed. Good. Then she made an extraordinary noise, and he flinched. It was a noise that only a true chicken or Hugh Fernley Whittingstall could find remotely attractive. It was definitely too gynecological for his taste, and he started to edge away. Where are you going? Said the hen. He thought quickly. On the ground at his feet was a grain of corn. He dipped his head, snatched it up and swallowed. Actually not bad. Tasted a bit like chicken. So, he said, is this your first time? First today, you mean? Oh, God, he thought. Also, strange how one aspect of the same basic process can be so enthralling, while another is so very... Good heavens, is that the word time? I really ought to be going. The hen made a noise he knew he'd never forget. Then she shook herself, stood up and walked away. In the dust, hull down like a tiger tank in the desert, he could see a light brown egg. He said, will it be okay like that? The question had slipped out before he had a chance to vet it for embarrassment potential. The egg, he said. The word stuck in his throat and came out as a sort of clucked hiccup. It's okay, isn't it? Just sort of leaving it there. The look she gave him made him wish he was coated in breadcrumbs. Course it's all right, she said. There'll be along any minute. He really shouldn't have, but he did. They, you know, twitch, peck, look of utter bemusement and scorn. Them. Well, he'd blown it with her already, and besides, after the whole egg thing, he wasn't really in the mood. I'm not sure we've got them where I come from, he said. Of course you have, she said. Everybody's got them. If there wasn't any them, there'd be no us. He wondered why he wasn't sweating. Maybe chickens don't. Maybe we're talking about cross purposes here. When you say them, she insisted. And he could tell he was starting to get right up her beak. You know. Them feeds us and fills the water and puts down straw and made the wire to keep the foxes away. Them up there. She arched her neck as though looking up at something very tall, in proportion, adjusting for altered perspectives, about human head height. Oh, he said. Them. Her relief was obvious. That's it, she said. They'll be along very soon. Now to top up the water and pick up the eggs. Oh, so that's all right. All right? He admitted it. She'd shocked him. He wanted to say, but that's your egg, your offspring, flesh of your flesh, and some tall bastard's going to come along any second now and steal it and beat it into an omelette or scramble it. You crazy, mixed-up kid. He didn't say any of that, but he did manage. You're okay with that? Hens can shrug. In fact, they do it rather well. Of course I am, she said. It's what's best for them, isn't it? And it's so kind and good of them, after all. Is it? He croaked. Girls, she went on. What's going to become of them if they stay here? Dead end, basically. Just thing round in the dirt. Instead, thanks to them, they get a really good start in boarding school, then university. Then a really good job. Doctors, lawyers, dentists, accountants. They're not going to get anything like that if they stay here and I hatch them. He cringed from wattles to claws. So, that's what they do. Is it? Send them away to... of course. Her eye could really be very beady when she wanted it to be. What else would we be doing it for? And you know that for a fact? Twitch. It stands to reason, doesn't it? Why else they'd take the eggs? The way you're going on, she added corrosively. Anybody think you thought they were up to no good? Well, would you be daft? The hen went on firmly. Like, if they mean us any harm, why do they go to all the trouble feeding and looking after us? No. Everybody knows they are good and kind and nice. And they take the eggs and hatch them out for us and give them a really good education so they can make something of themselves. Because, she added, more to herself than him. It'd be nice just once they'd ring or text or send us a letter, even just to say, hello! Let us know how they're getting on. Still, if it was me, I guess I want to forget about this place as quick as I could. If I had the chance to go to uni, I'd been off like a chicken. No messing. And I don't suppose I'd been in any rush to keep in touch with home either. Can't really blame them, can you? Silently he cursed his exceptionally keen memory, thanks to which he could just about remember the boiled egg he'd had for breakfast that morning. It could have been somebody, he thought. It could have been a contender. Only some vicious bastard smashed its head in and stuck toast in it. That's right, he whimpered. It's a world of opportunity out there, well worth crossing the road for. What road? He screwed up his face, trying to concentrate. It was so far away, a very faint signal, almost out of range. It's a sort of saying, he said. Well, a joke. Why did the chicken cross the road? He shook his head. Forget it, he said. The hen was looking at him. What's a joke? Good question. He couldn't quite remember. And could he really have eaten an egg that morning? Were his protein and calcium levels really that deficient? I don't know, he confessed. I think it's... He shook his head, then twitched it from side to side. No foxes. I don't know, can't be important. You want to stay away from roads. The hen said, there's great big fastings on roads that you can squash you flat. Best to stay in the coop, where it's safe. That's what they built it for. Well, of course. And they, he stooped, picked up a grain of corn, knew best. You had to believe that. Or nothing made sense. All that stuff, the echoes in his mind. Maybe he'd picked a bad nettle or something. The hen had wandered off. He stood on one leg for a moment, preening his wing feathers. He was beginning to see things straight now. For some bizarre reason, for a moment there, it got into his head that once he'd been one of them. Crazy. But it was all right now. He was better again. He knew exactly who and what he was. He was... Excuse me. Another hen was standing next to him. Quick check, no foxes, and he looked at her. Wattles rather pale, no sheen to her feathers. Hardly worth mating with, but nevertheless... No, the hen said. Not now. Listen, I need to talk to you. There was something very different about this hen. Odd. Didn't move right. He glared at her suspiciously. Why? Just now. 10 seconds, and she hadn't once checked for foxes. You said something about a road. What road? She was looking at him. You said, why did the chicken cross the road? He scuffed at the ground with his claws. Wasn't feeling right. No, why I said that. Forget it. Why did the chicken cross the road? The hen repeated. That's what you said. I heard you. All right, he snapped. Don't go on about it. I wasn't feeling well, but I'm better now. Oh, just a figment of my ticket, the hen said. To the other side. Click. What did you just... It's a joke, the hen said. A very old joke. A human joke. What's it? The hen came a little closer and lowered her voice. You know what a joke is, she said. You know because you're... Instinctively he knew he didn't want to hear. He threw his head back and crowed until he thought his lungs would burst, but the hen just stood there. All right, she said. Try this. Which came first? The chicken or the buck? He turned to run, as though all the foxes in the world were crowding in on him. Then he stopped. Egg, he said. The chicken or the egg? Slowly the hen nodded. And the answer is... The word came from deep inside him somewhere, a place he didn't know existed. Neither, he said. What did come first? Trans-dimensional phase shift relocation, he replied, and the words squeezed out of him like, say, a square egg. Setting up a differential feedback loop, which in turn triggers a fundamental temporal paradox sequence giving rise to what we subjectively term reality. Thank you, the hen said gravely. Now, how do you feel? He considered his answer. Bloody strange, he said. You know what? For a moment there, I could have sworn I was a chick. Don't, the hen hissed. Look down or sideways. Just keep looking at me. All right. He nodded. Good. Now then, what can you see? He looked and saw a smartly dressed middle-aged woman in heavy square-rimmed glasses and feathers, but somehow he knew they weren't really real and saw she was wearing a transparent disguise. Who are you? He said. My name's Mary, she replied. Mary Byron. Kevin Briggs, he replied automatically. Pleased to meet you. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I can't even tell you the self-control that took. The amount of times I wanted to just through that last bit go. let alone how difficult it is to actually talk in chicken and human at the same time. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. I don't usually break the fourth wall at the end of a chapter in this way, but my goodness gracious me. Oh, so much fun. Oh, right, I'm going to have to bypass the tune today because I am wiped out after this chapter. Okay, I'll stop laughing and try and be a human being. I don't get out much. Right, so... Oh, I know I should pause this and just re-record this last bit, but I just can't. Okay, so if you enjoyed this chapter, if you could hit the like button and notifications bell and share and subscribe if you don't already, that would be awesome. Or any one of those, or all of those, or some of those. Oh, the question's got to be, if you could be an animal, which animal would you be and why? And I'll tell you what I wouldn't want to be is a chicken, especially not with square eggs. Oh my goodness gracious. Right, so big loves and cuddles. I think we're up to date now. Oh, I need a cup of tea and yes. So yes, take it easy, take care of yourselves. Eat good foods, wear your sunscreen out in the sunshine if you've got sunshine, keep warm if it's cold. And please leave a comment if you want to, and thank you for indulging me. We will mend it, we will fix it, we will stick with it. I'll be Sim.